Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, May 19th. I'm Aryeh O'Sullivan, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. We open with the new government, and the cabinet had a busy meeting this morning, approving deputy ministers and approving a series of decisions made in anticipation of the 50th anniversary of the reunification of Jerusalem. And the new government took the traditional formal photograph with the president and also survived the no-confidence motion. Here with all the latest is IBA's political correspondent, Eli Wogelenter.
The cabinet this morning approved the appointment of 7 deputy ministers following the vote last week, postponing until next term the law limiting the number of deputy ministers allowed in the government. Meeting at the Israel Museum, the cabinet approved Yaakov Litzman of United Torah Judaism as deputy minister of the Health Ministry, Mayor Porush of UTJ as deputy minister of the Education Ministry, Tzipi Chotovely of Likud as deputy foreign minister, Yitzhak Cohen of Shas as deputy minister of the Finance Ministry, Meshulam Nahari of Shas as Deputy Minister of Welfare and Social Services, Ayub Kara of Likud, Deputy Minister of Regional Cooperation, and Rabbi Eli Ben-Dahan of Bayit Yehudi was appointed Deputy Defense Minister. In other government news, responsibility for issues dealing with Jerusalem, including authority over the Jerusalem Development Authority and the government company responsible for developing East Jerusalem, will be transferred from the Ministry of the Diaspora to the Prime Minister's office. The ministry, until now called the Ministry for Jerusalem and the Diaspora, will now be called just the Ministry for the Diaspora. The office had become embroiled in conflicts with the Jerusalem municipality and other local authorities who did not understand the mandate of the new office, and many Jerusalem municipal officials had criticized it. The cabinet approved a series of decisions made in anticipation of the 50th anniversary of the reunification of Jerusalem, as well as the city's strengthening as a whole. At the meeting, Netanyahu reiterated his government's stance on Jerusalem, saying, "We will not return to a divided city, a split city, a city with barbed wire and snipers on its walls. This will not happen, and we will ensure this will not happen." This follows comments he made with Likud officials in which he said he would like the peace process with the Palestinians to resume soon. To that end, he appointed Vice Premier Silvan Shalom, a former foreign minister, to take over for ex-Justice Minister Tzipi Livni as the government's representatives for those talks. Shalom expressed confidence that he could bring about renewed talks despite a Palestinian decision to focus on persuading the international community to impose a solution on Israel. Palestinian Authority leadership responded to the appointment of Shalom, saying it is unimportant who will mediate because Prime Minister Netanyahu isn't interested in peace. According to Israel Radio, the officials said that there is no point in meeting with Shalom until Israel agrees to a number of preconditions, including the end of building over the Green Line, the return to 1967 borders, and the release of prisoners in Israeli jails. Aryeh?
Thank you, Eli. The European Union wants a more active role in the peace process between Israel and the Palestinians. That's the word from EU's foreign policy chief, Federica Mogherini, on the eve of her visit to the region as top European diplomat. The 41-year-old former Italian foreign minister is planning to leverage Europe's position as Israel's biggest trade partner and as the Palestinians' main aid donor to nudge the two sides back towards the peace table. Mogherini said the EU is ready and willing to play a major role in relaunching the process based on the two-state solution. During her 2-day stay, she will be meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu and with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. A major bust on Israel's top organized crime families. The remand of alleged underworld boss Yitzhak Abergil was extended by 15 days, and 43 of his alleged cronies are in custody. More in this report by Dennis Zinn.
The Rishon LeZion Magistrates Court this morning lifted a gag order on the identity of gangster Yitzhak Abergil, whose remand was extended by 15 days. Abergil was arrested along with 43 other suspected criminals. This was the culmination of a multi-year investigation carried out by the Police Serious Crimes Unit, Lahav 443. The detainees are all suspected of taking part in several of the most serious crimes that the country has known, including murder, extortion, and drug-related offenses. However, Abergil is the most prominent, the kingpin. Amongst the serious crimes he's to be charged with is the attempted murder of his underworld rival, Zev Rosenstein, some 10 years ago by placing a bomb in his car. Rosenstein escaped unharmed, but 3 bystanders were killed. Abergil was a suspect from the beginning, but now it appears that there may be evidence for a conviction. Police Chief Yochanan Danino said that this wave of arrests is one of the biggest operations carried out by the police in recent years. He promised further disclosures in the near future. Abergil smiled at the press in the courtroom. He said that this was another attempt by the police to have him falsely convicted. He was confident that he would be released before the term of his remand is over. Dennis Zinn, IBA News.
Vowing that they will continue to protest until their demands are met, Israelis of Ethiopian descent held a demonstration in Tel Aviv last night demanding an end to what they claim is systematic discrimination in the country. Several hundred protesters took part in the rally, which centered on Rothschild Boulevard and later on Ibn Gvirol Street. The demonstrations passed peacefully without major disturbances, unlike the protests 2 weeks ago in Tel Aviv, which deteriorated into a major riot as participants threw bottles and rocks at police, who fired stun grenades and deployed water cannons. Last night, the protesters emphasized that as bad as police brutality is, it is just a symptom of a wider series of social failings regarding the Ethiopian community in Israel. The 50th anniversary of the execution of legendary spy Eli Cohen was marked in Israel. Cohen infiltrated into the Syrian leadership before being exposed, apprehended, and executed in Damascus in 1965. Israel has not had success in returning Cohen's remains to the country for burial. President Reuven Rivlin marked the date with a commemorative ceremony in his honor, which was attended by his widow, Nadia, their 3 children, Prime Minister Netanyahu, and the head of the Mossad, Tamir Pardo. Referring to Cohen as a hero of Israel, Rivlin said that Israel will always remember Cohen as a true hero who risked his life to safeguard Israel's security and freedom. Netanyahu said that Israel has an eternal obligation to bring Cohen's body home for burial. Netanyahu used the opportunity to stress the importance of Israel's control over the Golan Heights and credited the Israeli spy with having played a major role in Israel's victory over Syria in the Six-Day War 2 years after his death. Here's a bit of background on Cohen from Arutz Sheva.
In the early 1960s, Eli Cohen became a spy for Israel. Posing as a wealthy Arab businessman, he gained the confidence of many prominent government officials in Syria. Cohen learned many military secrets before he was caught, tortured, and executed in 1965. 2 years later, during the Six-Day War, Israel used Cohen's information to easily defeat the overconfident Syrian army. One of his brilliant feats was to recommend that trees be planted to shade the soldiers' outposts. The Israeli army then knew the exact location of every one of them because of the trees. To this day, his body is still in Syria. His widow has been campaigning for its release and return, but stated that it should not be in exchange for freeing terrorists.
Turning to Iraq, and the Islamic State is consolidating its control of the city of Ramadi as the West is trying to assess how serious a loss it is and how to prevent a move on the Iraqi capital of Baghdad. Alexander Jen has the details.
ISIS flags fly over the now empty streets of Ramadi, where hours before Iraqi troops were driven out by the terrorist group. Ramadi, the capital of the Anbar province, is situated just 70 miles west of Baghdad. Its takeover is a major defeat for Iraq. Gaining control of Ramadi positions ISIS to launch attacks on both Baghdad and its outskirts, as well as Tikrit, seized once before by the Sunni militia.
So there's no denying that this is a setback, but there's also no denying that the United States will help the Iraqis take back Ramadi. As of today, we are supporting the Iraqi security forces and the government of Iraq with precision airstrikes and advice to the Iraqi forces. Our aircraft are in the air and searching for ISIL targets, and they will continue to do so until Ramadi is retaken.
Michael O'Hanlon, a national security and defense policy analyst, has not abandoned all hope, but knows there are indisputable obstacles that come with the fall of Ramadi.
This is fairly bad news, and it also sets back the clock on what we had hoped would be by now a preparation for the counterattack against Mosul, the largest and most important city that ISIL holds.
Fighting for control of Ramadi between Iraqi forces and ISIS began in April. After capturing northern parts of Iraq as well as swaths of territory in the outskirts of Ramadi, ISIS launched a successful offensive to take the city. The U.S. conducted numerous airstrikes, but it did little to help the Iraqi forces on the ground. Iraqi troops retreated, leaving armored vehicles and weapons that ISIS has now claimed for their own use. In the aftermath of Ramadi's takedown, thousands of Shiite militias and the Iraqi military are gearing up for a counteroffensive to take back the most important city of the Anbar province. An estimated 500 people, both soldiers and civilians, have been killed over the past few days. 8,000 people have fled the city, and a majority are headed towards Baghdad, implicating an ongoing humanitarian crisis. 114,000 residents have fled Ramadi and the surrounding areas since the violence began to intensify in April. Alexandra Jen for IBA News.
You are not welcome back here. That's the word from Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott, who ruled out amnesty for Australian citizens who are trying to quit Islamic State and other Islamic terror groups and return home. At least 70 Australians are fighting in Iraq and Syria, and Abbott says that those who do return face prison.
A crime is a crime is a crime, and if you go abroad to break Australian law, if you go abroad to kill innocent people in the name of misguided fundamentalism and extremism, if you go abroad to become an Islamist killer, well, we're hardly going to welcome you back into this country. And if you go and you seek to come back, as far as this government is concerned, you will be arrested, you'll be prosecuted, and you will be jailed, because it is a serious criminal offence under Australian law to fight with terrorist groups overseas.
Turning to the U.S. presidential campaign, and New Jersey Governor Chris Christie has yet to formally announce a White House race, but one of the signs that he is strongly considering a bid for the 2016 Republican nomination is that he has made numerous appearances in New Hampshire, which holds one of the party's first presidential nominating contests. In a speech yesterday, Christie was critical of the Obama administration's strategy in foreign policy, including its handling of relations with Israel.
Our commitment to Israel must be absolute. Israel is a beacon of freedom in a sea of autocracy, and our friendship should be unshakable. Over the last few years, this administration has taken our Israeli partners for granted, and it is shameful the way the president has treated them. Israel and its people must be supported by the United States and the American president. Its existence and its security is non-negotiable, and the Iranians and others who think otherwise must be reminded by America of that simple fact.
A 65-year-old woman became the oldest person ever to give birth in Israel. A healthy baby boy was delivered by cesarean section yesterday at Meir Medical Center in Kfar Saba. Haya Shachar from Bnei Brak had a 2.68-kilogram baby, which was produced by in vitro fertilization after having been unable to have a baby during her 46-year marriage. She was just shy of the world record for the oldest person to give birth, which is credited to a Spanish woman who was just short of her 67th birthday. Shachar's message to the public was, never give up. Haaretz journalist Akiva Eldar was run over by a car and moderately injured in Sydney, Australia. The driver was a singer for the well-known rock group Noiseworks. According to police, Eldar was in a crosswalk. Here's a report of the incident from Australia's TV9.
Well, Noiseworks frontman John Stevens is back in the public eye for all the wrong reasons once again, after his car collided with an elderly pedestrian at Point Piper in Sydney's east. Reporter Jane Azzopardi is at the scene tonight. Jane, what are we being told about this incident?
Pete, this is the last thing the singer wants or needs. We understand that he had been visiting his son and was turning left here into New South Head Road when he has collided with a 69-year-old man on a pedestrian crossing. Stevens did stop and try to help. Police arrived, they gave him a breath test and he returned a negative result. That 69-year-old man is now being treated in hospital for non-life-threatening leg injuries, but it's clear that this incident has taken its toll on Stevens too. In the last half an hour, he has issued a statement to 9 News, and I'll read that to you now. He says, "I hope the gentleman is okay. Police and paramedics have assured me he is, but I will be checking in to make sure. It was just an accident. I can't take a trick right now. I'm devastated."
Well, turning back to politics and diplomacy, we're going to be joined now in the studio by former Deputy Foreign Minister and former Ambassador to the United States, Danny Ayalon. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be here.
So, Ambassador Ayalon, the European Foreign Policy Chief is on her way to Israel now, and it's quite clear that her message is the status quo is just not going to cut it anymore. How will her message be received by the new government?
Well, I'm not sure it will be received very well, because right now we know that the intransigency is on the Palestinian side, and certainly the day or 2 days after the government has been formed, this is too much of a blatant pressure. And right now it seems like before we even move to any kind of a dialogue, we need to reestablish trust. I think it should take maybe a page out of Obama's new book, where he said he didn't think that this year we can realistically achieve peace.
So Prime Minister Netanyahu today presented his new government, which is a narrow, right-wing, pro-settlement, ultra-Orthodox government. In the immediate future, do you see a growing international isolation of Israel with this kind of government?
Well, there has been attempts, whether we had a left of center government or right of center government. I think that this is not the question. The question is, will the Palestinians, for once, will really address Israel concerns about recognition of Israel as the Jewish homeland of the Jewish people, whether they will recognize security arrangements, whether they will recognize our claim to Jerusalem, especially the Temple Mount. All these things which should be addressed directly in a negotiation on a bilateral basis have been pushed aside. So I think it will not be realistic to try and push a two-state solution before really getting into narrowing the gaps. This is why I believe only an incremental progress can be made, namely a long-term intermediate solution.
So the Prime Minister has appointed Silvan Shalom as the new minister who's responsible for contacts with the United States and with the Palestinians. Do you think he's the right man for the job?
Yes, he has experience, absolutely. Whether it should be taken away from the foreign ministry or not being returned to the foreign ministry, it's another question. I think that just for streamlining, just for having a broader a view, it should have all been concentrated in the foreign ministry, because they all feed, all these issues feed from each other. So to compartmentalize it, I don't think it's very, very efficient. But this is the price we pay for our political system.
So as the former foreign minister, deputy foreign minister, and the former ambassador to the United States, how do you think this government is going to have relationships with the Obama administration until the Obama administration is over? Well,
I think that first and foremost is to reestablish trust and confidence, and of course mutual respect between the Prime Minister and the President. I believe that first thing of order would be a visit of the Prime Minister in Washington, where they sit in a tete-a-tete, maybe scream at each other, but at the end of the day agree on some kind of a common agenda for the remaining time of the President in office.
Well, Ambassador Danny Ayalon, thank you so much for joining IBA News. Appreciate having your insight.
Thank you.
Taking a look at local finance, and the shekel today put in a mixed performance in foreign currency trading, while share prices on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange were up across the board. Here's a look at the afternoon numbers. Well, many residents in the coastal areas enjoyed a second straight day of beach going as major heat wave continued into its second day. It was about 40 centigrade, that's about 104 in Fahrenheit. Some residents took the day off to work on their tans, and forecasters say that tomorrow will still be Sharav conditions, but not quite as hot as today. But if you do go to the beach, it's strongly advised to wear sunscreen, a hat, and drink plenty of water. The temperatures are forecasted to drop somewhat, but there's still a heat wave, and mainly in the mountains and in the center of the country. Here are the expected highs and lows at home and abroad for the next 24 hours. Thank you for being with us this evening. Aaron Viner will be here tomorrow to bring you the latest news from Israel. Until then, I'm Ariel Sullivan, wishing you a shalom from Jerusalem.